Hello and welcome. We all know about Israel as the startup nation. The big question is, where do these startups come from? Where do the young men and women who constitute these startups form their knowledge, and where do they learn their tricks? Well, I'm now joined by Joseph Klafter, president of Tel Aviv University in Israel, who's going to hopefully give us some insights. Mr. Klafter, thank you very much for speaking with us. So, university has a lot of young students who take up computer science. And that I'm assuming is in response to what's happening around the world in terms of what young people want to do, which is to get into engineering and maybe create startups and things like that. What's the general sense that you get in terms of, first, universities and centers of learning meeting the needs of young people today and their aspirations?
Well, universities are actually, from my point of view, almost the only driving force for the economy, for the growth. And this, of course, brings students to the university, and their choice of what to study is in a way dictated by what they see in the market. Computer sciences is, of course, one of the topics. Electrical engineering is the same, and you can even put it under the same umbrella of cyber. Cyber is so hot a buzzword today that it attracts a lot of interest from companies, and therefore the academia follows through students who enroll into these topics or related topics.
And there are so many exciting startups coming out of Israel. So, and I'm sure your university has contributed to many of them too.
For sure, yes. If you look at the list of startups, Israeli startups, you'll see that many of the founders and the thinkers behind it are the graduates of the university, of Tel Aviv University, also of other universities. I believe we are leading. And in general, I would say that the whole concept of startup nation, that is now kind of a coined concept for Israel, has been stemmed from the higher education system in Israel.
Right. And how does this manifest itself? I mean, so one of the questions that a lot of people I'm sure ask you as well is that how does Israel have such a high per capita production or rollout of young people wanting to take risks, become the next Google and so on, versus maybe other countries where it doesn't happen?
Yes, so it's a combination of the higher education and also the army, service in the army. Army in Israel needs to be, I think, modernized all the time and sophisticated. And sophistication means that it has to really include the research in its R&D. And the universities, of course, supply the manpower for this. Besides, there is something that I always say, that the spirit or the atmosphere in the Israeli universities somehow cultivate this innovation and entrepreneurship culture. And this is all around. And if you look at our students, for instance, at Tel Aviv University, there's a group of students who came up with the idea to establish what they call Start Tel Aviv University. And these are students who graduated, and they mentor younger students of how to open a business, how to raise funding, what does it mean to take an idea and to commercialize it. This is already on the student level. In parallel, we have similar system for the faculty itself. We have a daughter company, which is our commercial arm, that does the same thing for the faculty of Tel Aviv University. So overall,
funds initiatives or?
Yes, even funds initiatives. And here I would like to mention an interesting connection with India. We declared on campus a momentum fund, which is raising investors' money in funding IP to take it the next steps. And the first company or companies that invested actually were Tata Industries. So with a name like Tata, it's of course a magnet to others to come into this momentum fund. And yes, so these IPs that are potentially can lead to a product have an initial funding through such a momentum fund that I just described.
Right. Let me ask you a more broad question.
Yes.
How do you treat or respond to the word failure in a university environment with the kind of students that are coming in today?
Okay, one of the characteristics, I would say, of the Israeli students, and most of them come to the university in an older age after they serve in the army, in the military. So the basic, I would say, culture is Not not to stop when you see a failure, to try again, and we use the word chutzpah, which is actually like audacity. Yes. And I think that I can't say that this is in the DNA of every student, but as a general concept or culture, I think this is what we have in Israel.
And how does chutzpah, for instance, compare between your generation and the next generation?
Same.
Okay.
Same, but in different aspects of life. My generation belongs to the early years of the country. Then the reality was different. The challenges were different. Yes, establishing a country. Now the country is established, it's stable. So now taking the next step of a very strong economy is the next challenge, and therefore it's. I think it's the same chutzpah in different channels.
Okay. Well, what are some of the challenges ahead as you are working with and trying to drive the knowledge economy through thousands of students who pass through your doors, and what might be the pitfalls that you might face?
The pitfalls is the future that looks a little bit less pink or less bright than what we have today. We notice that at high schools, which feed actually the students to the higher education system, the students choose less the hard sciences, like physics and math are less of topics that are chosen by students at high schools. And this is something that we try now to change, either by working directly with the high schools or with cultivating the very talented one already at the high school age within the university, and also emphasizing sciences when students enter to the university. We must change this, what we see as a little bit a trend that we don't like.
Okay. And this is something that's happening all over the world. It's not something that's only happening in Israel.
I guess so, but you know, my war is Israel, and even more than this, Tel Aviv University.
Right. Mr. Klafter, thank you very much for speaking
Thank
with
you.
us.